And so I think that I want to be clear that there are many standardization opportunities. But as industry remains very nascent, we should be careful about standardizing too early. The old joke is, if you have 13 standards and you don't like them, well, you all get together and very soon you have 14 standards. So anyway, I just want to indicate that I do think it's important to take a good pace on it, but it is an issue where if you go before the science knows what you're measuring, you will get something that doesn't work with industry later.
Okay, very good. This is a clear, very strong, important topic. It's in the essay array and it's in the discussion, so we will come back to this also today. We have seen the science itself, but we have, in order to do science, we need infrastructures. We need platform, we need to have also enabling technologies. This means that we need to have, for example, cryogenics, we need to have amplifiers and so on. We need to be able to fabricate. So in fact, there is a lot of different activities in order to be able to develop science and technology. And this might be also a topic of collaboration, and I would like to have your vision on this, for example, a quantum computation center, or as you say, the demonstration of a communication transatlantic platform. So those are big investments. Those are real strong programs. They can drive the science, but this has a strong top-down component. So maybe you have already visions about infrastructure and enabling technology. So maybe we start with Gustav this time.
Yeah. No, Philippe, I believe that indeed the access to infrastructure or experimental facilities is what I would see as the most immediate area where we could have a fruitful cooperation. Let me just make an example. I mean, don't quote me if it's not 100% accurate. We have just launched this QKD pilot, which is for us a test case to see if we can deploy at continental level a quantum communication infrastructure. Now imagine we would have been in a position to have this talk 2 years back, and we could have knocked on Jack's door saying, I know that you have somewhere hidden such a pilot, so could we get access to that pilot, which will make us win 3 or 4 years in our development, and we could deploy our European infrastructure much earlier. And on the other hand, you will win because we will bring other types of equipment. You would be testing interoperability, multi-vendor systems. We would have to run joint applications, develop several layers of the stack. So both sides would win a couple of years in the development cycle and would be able to deploy their own commercial networks in parallel, which will have some common features, common developed elements, but would still distinguish themselves with some native conditions or some native developments.
Okay, very good. Elisabeth, maybe you have a point of view on those infrastructures or enabling technologies, or?
Yeah, this is more difficult because, of course, these enabling technologies depend much on the field where you are, and it's very different for communication or sensing, for example, and for quantum computing, where we are really now at the beginning of some demonstrators, and this is some part of exchanging these enabling technologies, maybe strategic or not so strategic, and it's difficult to decide there at that point. And on the other hand, I mean, people want to go ahead, and we have to think about how strategic this stuff is, listen to the instructions of the European Commission, and also go towards progress. So I don't think it's an easy question, and it really has to be studied depending on the field and on the subject.
So Kenji, from Japan, do you see that sharing infrastructures or developing together fabrication process, or enabling technology can be a subject of collaboration.
So I think that would be very important, might be in the future, but now it is too early, and we are in the preliminary stage to think about this possibility in reality. But what I think is that, to reiterate what I have mentioned in my presentation, it might be very interesting to establish an international innovation hub in each area that attracts the people and the investment from abroad, and that could be the seed of the future common facilities among the different communities. Yeah.
So we keep also this idea of the hub. This means not only discussing the content, but discussing the context in which we can put our collaboration in order to speed up. That's a very strong statement. Jake, you have some point to make about this?
I would move slightly away from the scientific infrastructure question, because I think we have established techniques, and just talk a little bit about some of the challenges for using shared infrastructure effectively. And one of these is, when you share the infrastructure, you also have to share a sense of what it means to be secure in the infrastructure, right? And to have a sense of what it means to have an open access to it while maintaining and protecting concerns and considerations associated with the misuse of that infrastructure. Sometimes when you go into the story at the beginning saying we're just going to do everything completely open, it's so open that your brain falls out. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. And I think the other key point, which we hear again and again, is in infrastructure and in supporting technology, we want to sort of have a free flow. And I think we want to look towards multilateral engagements to achieve that free flow rather than sort of unilateral shutdowns. And so I think we should look at our past 70-year-plus history of cooperation in key areas of scientific infrastructure and other technological infrastructure. For example, as a researcher, I have been able to use the IMEC and LETI facilities to do interesting fabrication work in photonics, right? So, that shared access and ability to send files over to Belgium and get the work done and have pieces sent back to the US, right? We also have similar work. These are very positive structures, but they're already out there. So I think we can just build upon our existing shared approaches and leverage those effectively.
Thank you, and I think this is also a key point, because we have a tradition of exchanging and using the facilities of the other in many fields, and we should not be so afraid of opening. But at the same time, there is always this discussion between open science, open innovation, and IP protection and protection of markets and economic growth. At the same time also, I would like now to move a little to the dark side, because we can also think about maybe brain drain, IP drain, because also you can buy a startup, for example. And we discussed in the pre-meeting also senior drain, that maybe you can get the retired people in some country and you attract them with big salaries, and then you have, so this is a new word, senior drain, which can be an interesting concept. But you see, we have very positive things, we all collaborate, but how do we think to regulate, or do we see an issue in the fact that at the same time it's a competition? And this is a tough question, so we start with Gustav.
Well, because I'm the largest one in the room, right?
Yeah, you are the tallest.
Yeah. No, the brain drain or the sellout of skill and competences, I think it's one of the fundamental risks and fears of everybody. It's not by accident that in the objectives of the flagship we have clearly stated, and this was repeated again by our DDG yesterday, that was a flagship we want to retain and attract the skills. So I would say it goes both ways. If you want to avoid the brain drain, on one hand you must offer attractive conditions so that people think twice before leaving. This is, let's say, our own homework we have to do, and which we hope with something like the flagship we can achieve. However, it also needs some respect vis-à-vis the other partners you're teaming up with, say, okay, it could be easier for me just to go and buy out your top brains. Maybe it would be a short win, but in the long run, this would damage the relations and would just have as a reaction some export controls, even including on skilled people. So that's why if we really are serious about the partnership, we must also show some mutual respect of not trying to buy out the best elements on both sides.
And I propose that now we get momentum in the discussion. So if some of you has some other point of view, some addition, you can tell it. Otherwise, I move a little to another subject. So please, if you have something to say on this, you...
I have just a addition really to what Gustav is saying, and I suspect there's some more things, but I think, you know, figuring out mechanisms for maintaining shared values and also shared security is very helpful. I think, though, the most important thing for all of this is make opportunities. You know, how do you keep people engaged when the scientific or technological opportunities are high, and if you don't provide those opportunities and then a larger salary comes around, they leave. So it's wonderful that we have these programs like Flagship and National Climate Initiative and the Japanese Moonshot program and related topics that are coming up, because these are ways that we tell our doers that they're welcome, that they're encouraged. And so we can't lose sight of that.
Kenji, you want to comment on the same issue?
Okay, so that from the political point of view, our government says that we keep promoting flexible rights with open and closed strategies. But personally, that IP is produced from the R&D, and so that the strategy of the IP should be associated with each research and development. So, and this is what we already have been doing so far. And like Jake mentioned, that what we can do is that how the government can support to get an IP, that we, how to establish a system systematically to support the researchers to get IP based on their very good research and development, which should be done internationally. Yeah.
Okay, and maybe Elizabeth, I would like to move maybe to education, because this is connected. We discussed brain drain, and but we also know that people is a key issue, and you put people as a strategic issue. And in international collaboration, maybe we can also think about sharing good practice in education, exchanging people in order to train. And this is a different issue. And we all know that exchanging of postdoc, of PhDs, it's a very efficient way to do international collaboration and to have the best training for everybody. So maybe you can comment on your vision about international cooperation as far as education and training is concerned.
Yeah, this is particularly important for quantum science and technology because it's quite interdisciplinary subject. And we can only now make real progress in that field if we have connections with people from informatics, from computers in particular, and from many other fields like fabrication, like communication, I mean classical communications and so on. And these are subjects depending on the countries, but in several countries and in Europe, these fields are too much closed. And there should be an opening of education, for example, for engineers to quantum stuff and things like that. And for that, exchange of students, international training is extremely important because this way the students can see other places and other fields where education is organized in a different way, and then access to broader knowledge that can be very useful in the field. So I think international exchange at the level of even master students, PhD students, and postdoc is very important.
Yeah, and also we have to invent new training and education because it's a kind of new field in between many fields. We have to train engineers working on software to have enough quantum mechanics thought in order to understand quantum mechanics. So maybe you have some other points about it, education, collaborating at international level on education? Or I move to my next question.
Yeah, so maybe someone already mentioned that, yeah, you're right. So this is very important issue, that international education for the PhD, those highly educated people. But it's also important to do this to the middle level or students, like junior high school or high school. This is very important because the quantum mechanics doesn't meet our common sense, actually. So that it is very important to start this education earlier in the career. And actually, what I have heard recently and impressed is that China has organized one conference where they invited many quantum scientists, including a Nobel laureate. And they organized also some lectures to the, I forgot exactly, but maybe junior high school students or high school students in Shanghai. So how they are studying, or what is the quantum mechanics, and this is what they organize. So this is already done in China and started. So I was surprised that we need to be rushed in Japan, actually.
You want to comment on this? So I move to
Well, I think that in international workforce, you start early. And it's not just about understanding there's interesting science, but also understanding that it's done worldwide, right? And that's a challenge because it's expensive. You know, we talk about scientific exchange. Scientific exchange is easier at the graduate student level, where we're spending tens of thousands of dollars per annum on that person, than it is, you know, in middle school, where curricular development is a fraction of that effort. So there are real challenges there, but I think that in order to make this all happen, you just have to maintain the community. And I just want to be really clear that the international workforce reflects the community of scientists. You don't know that there's a research opportunity across the pond unless you're exposed to it. And if your principal investigator or professor has a collaborator, that helps a lot. So just keeping the research collaborations builds the network, which enables those international collaborations and sharing. And I think it's important to do it from holistically bottom to top.
So this is a very good transition to my last question before giving the floor to the audience, which is about the tools you are thinking about to implement this international collaboration. Which way to finance, which program. So maybe if you can comment about what you have in mind and what we can expect for the future, this will be very good. So maybe I start with you and then go around again.
Yeah, I can. Maybe we'll go counterclockwise this time.
Yeah.
So I will say, in terms of the tools that we look to, as you may be aware, the U.S. has actually done a variety of international funding efforts in quantum information science for the past 20 years. We don't intend to stop. That's a tool that we use and we think is important. So that's essentially, we have research grants that international folks apply to and are able to receive money for. And that helps just make certain that the best science gets done so that we can know what it is. That's a critical part of doing science. And I think that, looking forward, in addition to that, looking at targeted joint programs, looking at targeted opportunities, and ensuring, we have large multinational companies. They're U.S. companies, or they're German companies, or they're Finnish companies, that have presences elsewhere. And that's another key part of the collaboration space. And so, for example, Jürgen mentioned this Quantum Economic Development Consortium, which is a U.S.-focused consortium that is already starting to add on international partners, right? And so there are, I think, just key opportunities across many existing mechanisms And then also new mechanisms we'll have to look to.
Maybe
So
Kenji?
the question is to summarize what we do in the future, is it?
And the tool, what you think to implement as concrete tools to strengthen the collaboration?
Okay. So maybe this is what I am reiterating, but again, the scientifically, it just keep going what we are doing in international collaboration, and this is a way to go as a science and technology. But international collaboration, as I mentioned, that it would be very interesting to launch international innovation hub in each area to attract people and investment from abroad. And for the education, so I completely agree with Elizabeth to have an international collaboration to educate highly educated people, and also to the middle-level students. So that might be a quick summarize.
And maybe to teach the teacher?
Teacher, yeah, right. So teacher is very important, yes. It might be a bit difficult to train the junior high school teacher to do so, but we need to elaborate to establish a system to do so. Yeah.
Okay.
This needs to be supported by the government, I think.
Gustav, maybe from the EU, how much million you want to put on the table to collaborate with US and China?
Well, this is a question I cannot answer. Good. We have no budget yet for the next 7 years, so it's speculative. I would rather like to turn the question around. You asked what instruments or tools we should in place. I would say for what type of cooperation, for what purpose. We have already a number of instruments and tools that work quite well, which so far are mainly for bottom-up cooperation. So each side has its own national funding programs or rules. There are some international agreements. So if you want to team up with a partner from outside the European Union, they can participate in the framework program. Everything is fixed, but there's no strategic drive behind it. Now, my question is, if we are now moving into more strategic thinking with the flagship as a supplier of key enabling technologies that would like to flow into all our infrastructure deployments, what is the legal framework, instrument, tool, however you want to call this, that we should define and establish in cooperation with our international partners to facilitate this development, to put in motion all the things, all the ideas we have been discussing this morning, to make sure that, as Jack likes, we have the security element in it, but we also keep a certain aspect of openness and enable the ideas to flow and the innovation to flourish.
Okay, thank you. And Elizabeth, do you dream about some possible tool to strengthen the international collaboration?
No, I'm not dreaming. The point is, most things have been mentioned already. I think they are just as Gustav mentioned, the question of regulations and organization. And now, of course, everybody wishes this collaboration, at least on research. And now the question is how to find funding for that. And this is this is a question that we have to study at either the European level or the national level or binational level. It's sometimes complicated. Would be good to have a European framework for that, but this is again to discuss and study, and we'll see.
So thank you very much, and I think it's time to open in the last 5 minutes the discussion to all the audience. So if you want to take the opportunity, so there is a question over there. If you can give a microphone to this gentleman. And give your name and affiliation, please.
So good morning, everyone. Thierry Botter from Airbus. Thank you all for your contribution to the panel this morning. My question is for Jake. It's been a year since the implementation of the US's national strategy. I was wondering if you could comment on the uptake of quantum technologies by industrial end users. And if you've seen something significant, what you think has worked best to try and bring that in.
Thank you so much for there. It's a pleasure to see you. In terms of changes over the course of the last year, you can, I visited Blue Forest yesterday, right? Their production line is larger now than it was a year ago as the more dilution refrigerators roll out. We see a lot of, economic growth in the supply chain occurring at the present time. We see an ever increasing investment in the startup and sort of end user application interface communities. But one of the things that we're all very alert to, and it's not a US specific thing, is that the workforce that can execute these research programs is limited. And so I think we just are very much aware that it behooves us to broaden what it means to be a quantum information person. And so I think that's really where we're looking at in the industrial space right now.
Okay, thank you. Linek, you have Jürgen, another question? Please, a microphone here. First there and then you, Jürgen. I was not able to see over there.
Sorry, I'm very far away. Frank Wilhelm Mauch, Saarland University. And what is relevant for this discussion, I moved to Saarland University from Canada and tried to collaborate with my old place by applying for joint funding. And that always failed miserably because oftentimes these funding schemes are in the end set up such that they hurt you. You have a competition on one side of the Atlantic with a low success probability, but then on top of this, your partner on the other side of the Atlantic has to win with an equally low success probability, and the number smaller than 1 squared gets smaller. So I think in setting this up, I very much welcome everybody who has said that programs like this should be built bottom up. And I think this is the only way how they can work, to make them bottom up and simple. Because first of all, let's not have too many workshops where we get to know our colleagues in Japan and in the US. We know them already. We meet them all the time. We read their papers. But secondly, I think when we're adding a very high ambition, we may risk adding so many complications that there will be very few successful consortia. My dream would be that in a future project, I can add on a non-European partner without reducing my likelihood to get funded and by this close a strategic gap. And if that has been achieved, this is a success. Let's not fall the fate of many kind of well-intended initiatives for this type of collaboration, which in the past have failed in practical implementation. Let's keep it simple so it can be successful.
So it's more common than the question, but maybe somebody want to...
So actually, that's a very important point. And actually, one of our agency referred to as Japan Science and Technology Agency, referred to as JST, started open call for bilateral countries. And for example, Japan and French researchers could apply for the same program and get funding from JST. And we are planning similar schemes for US and other countries, so that I think that this is one of the possibilities that you mentioned right now. As long as I do not misunderstand your comments.
Okay, maybe the last question by Jürgen.
Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. There is an elephant in the room, China. Maybe you can comment a little bit on how you deal with cooperations with China.
Who wants to
look at the elephant? So we are neighbors, so that
the neighbor first.
You have to mention first. So actually, so what's happening is now is that we are more and more collaborating with China than before. I don't know why. Maybe this is somehow related to the international incidents. But I think that scientifically, the government also understands that very important to collaborate with China on quantum science and technology also. But what Cabinet Office is worried about is that security issues or military issues. So that these are the issues that we need to solve in the future. I'm not really sure that we really be able to solve these issues. I think this is a summary of the Japanese activities with China recently. But scientifically, we more and more collaborate with the Chinese scientists. And I am invited very often to China, to the meeting there about the quantum technologies.
Maybe a short comment by both countries, regions. Jake first.
So, you know, when we look at the scientific community, China is a big part of the scientific community, and it's up to us here up on the stage and the portions of the world that we're sort of representing to maintain a scientific culture. And if we do, we have an opportunity to, as a world, take great advantage of investments around the world, people around the world who can solve hard problems. But there are real geopolitical and security risks which we cannot be blind to. And whatever paths we take to maintain what it means to do science have to take those into account.
And Gustav, you want to say a few words?
Let me return the question to Jürgen. Where do you see us having or needing to learn or get something from China? And how confident are we that we can build up a trusted relationship like we have with the other regions in the room here and achieve reciprocity? These are the fundamental questions we ask ourselves whenever we talk about international cooperation. With certain regions, there's a longer tradition of cooperation answering these questions, so it's more straightforward. With others, it's more difficult for various reasons. So unless those questions are answered, I think the elephant will remain somewhere in the room.
So Marcus is standing up since some time, so I'm afraid we have to close the discussion. So we'd like to thank the panel participant again. And as a conclusion, as I said, we have this duty in the coordination action to try to continue to build those kind of relations. So this will be a topic you will be hearing about in all our different flagship events. So thank you, everybody.